The lab plunged into total darkness just as the centrifuge hit full speed and my hand brushed against hers in the narrow aisle. Before either of us could pull away, a surge of something raw and electric pulled our lips together in a kiss that tasted like adrenaline and unspoken need. My fingers tightened on her waist, the world narrowed to the heat of her mouth and the way her breath caught against mine. When the emergency light snapped on with a cold fluorescent buzz, I stared straight into the wide hazel eyes of Genesis Harrington, the only daughter of the man who had nearly destroyed everything my family had built. Horror flooded my veins faster than any chemical spill. I stumbled back, knocking over a tray of pipettes that clattered across the tile like accusations. Genesis stood frozen in her white coat, her dark hair slightly mussed from my hands, her lips still parted in the same shock that gripped me. I knew her face from every tense industry gala, from the newspaper clippings my father kept pinned like wanted posters. Harrington Dynamics had stolen the CRISPR patent that was supposed to save Voss Innovations 10 years ago, leaving my family scrambling for survival, while Victor Harrington toasted to his billions. And now here I was, Ariana Voss, 28-year-old heir to a crumbling legacy, with the taste of the enemy still on my tongue. My heart hammered so hard I thought the monitors would pick it up. This could not be happening. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, the automatic lock clicking behind me like a prison gate. Outside in the San Francisco fog, I leaned against the cold brick wall of the Research Institute, gasping for air. The city lights blurred through the mist, mirroring the chaos in my head. How had I let that happen? We had been working late in the shared university lab on separate projects, mine for Voss, the grant-funded one, hers apparently for her own research. No words exchanged, just polite nods when our paths crossed earlier that evening. But in the sudden blackout, the air thick with the scent of ozone and sterile equipment, something broke. I had felt alone for so long, carrying the weight of my family's expectations, the silent pressure to be the perfect daughter, the future CEO who would restore our name. My father, Marcus Voss, still woke up at night muttering about the Harrington theft. My mother reminded me at every dinner that the company needed alliances, not distractions, especially not the kind that could get me disowned in our conservative circles. Being gay was something I buried deep under layers of lab coats and boardroom smiles. No one in the family knew. No one could know. Yet in that dark moment with a stranger whose name I didn't even confirm until the lights hit, I had let it all spill out. Now the stranger had a name and a legacy that could ruin me. I drove home through the empty streets of the Mission District, my hands shaking on the wheel. The Voss family penthouse overlooked the bay, glittering like a promise I was terrified to break. Inside, I poured a glass of water and stared at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. My blonde hair was disheveled, my cheeks flushed. What if she told someone? What if this was a setup? But the memory of her kiss wasn't calculated, it was real, hungry and surprised just like mine. I couldn't sleep. By morning the guilt had twisted into something sharper, curiosity. I checked the lab logs online. Genesis had booked the space under a neutral grant too. No direct link to Harrington Dynamics on paper, but I knew better. At the office, my father called me into his glass-walled corner suite, the Golden Gate visible behind him like a symbol of the bridges we could never cross with our rivals. Ariana, the board is pushing for aggressive moves against Harrington on the new gene therapy bid. You're leading the presentation next week. Make them bleed. His voice was steel, but his eyes held the exhaustion of a decade-long war. I nodded, swallowing the secret burning in my throat. That afternoon I found myself back at the institute, telling myself it was only to retrieve forgotten notes. Genesis was there again in the same lab, adjusting a microscope. She looked up, her expression guarded but not hostile. We need to talk, she said quietly, closing the door. My pulse raced, but I stayed. We sat on opposite stools, the air thick with unsaid things. I didn't plan that, she began, her voice low and steady. Neither did I admitted. But it happened. And now what? Her eyes searched mine. I don't know, Ariana. But I felt it too. The way she said my name sent a shiver down my spine. We talked for an hour, skirting the family history, avoiding the landmines. She revealed she had distanced herself from her father's company, choosing independent research to escape the shadow. I shared fragments of my own pressure, the endless expectations. By the time we parted, we had agreed to meet again in secret at a quiet cafe across the bay. Driving away, I gripped the wheel tighter. This was dangerous, foolish. Yet the pull was stronger than any rational warning. For the first time in years I felt truly seen. But at what cost? The price of one kiss in the dark was already climbing higher than I could calculate. I arrived home to my mother setting the table for dinner, her sharp eyes noticing my distraction. "Everything all right at the lab?" she asked. "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile. The lie tasted worse than the truth I was hiding. That night I lay awake replaying the kiss, the revelation, the conversation. Genesis Harrington, daughter of the enemy, and the only person who had ever made me forget the weight on my shoulders. The storm outside mirrored the one building inside me. I had no idea how far it would rage. The cafe in Sausalito was tucked behind a row of houseboats, the fog rolling in like a curtain for our secret. Genesis arrived first, her dark coat blending with the gray morning, her hazel eyes lighting up when she saw me. We ordered coffee and sat at a corner table where the bay lapped quietly against the docks. Talking came easier this time, away from the sterile lab lights. She told me about growing up in the Harrington mansion, the constant pressure to excel, to prove she wasn't just the boss's daughter. I opened up about my father's endless comparisons, how every decision I made was measured against the family legacy. We avoided naming the patent theft, but it hung between us like the fog. By the third meeting our hands brushed across the table, and neither pulled away. The spark from the lab hadn't faded, it had grown into something warmer, steadier. I found myself smiling at her texts during board meetings, hiding my phone under reports. But the guilt gnawed. At work my team pushed the new proposal, the one designed to undercut Harrington dynamics. My father praised my focus, unaware it was distraction, not dedication, driving me. One evening after a long day, Genesis suggested a walk along the Embarcadero. We kept distance, but the conversation flowed deep into our fears. She admitted the loneliness of hiding her own truth from her family. Her father would never accept a daughter who loved women. I confessed the same. The Voss name demanded perfection and straight lines. When we parted under a street lamp, her fingers lingered on mine, sending heat through my veins. I drove home replaying it, the way her laugh softened the edges of my anxiety. Yet the next day reality crashed in. My mother scheduled a family dinner with the Parkers, an old Money Alliance family, whose son had been subtly positioned as my future match. I sat through the meal smiling at the polite conversation while my mind wandered to Genesis. My father toasted to future mergers, to crushing rivals. Every word felt like a chain tightening. Later in my room I stared at the photo on my desk, the family portrait from before the patent war. We looked unbreakable then. Now I was the crack. Genesis and I met again, this time at a small gallery in the Castro where the art spoke of hidden lives. We stood close pretending to study a painting, our shoulders touching. The prejudice around us was subtle but present, a whispered comment from a patron about traditional values. It stung, reminding me what we risked. Back in the car, Genesis turned to me, her voice serious. "This can't stay hidden forever, Ariana. But how do we even begin?" I didn't have an answer, only the fear of losing everything, my family, my career, the fragile piece I had built. Still I reached for her hand. "For now we have this." The drive home was quiet, my thoughts racing. The price was mounting, every secret meeting chipped at my loyalty. Yet each moment with her felt like breathing after years underwater. I wondered how long I could balance both worlds before one pulled me under completely. At the office the next morning my father dropped a folder on my desk. Preliminary intel on Harrington's latest move. "We strike first." I opened it, seeing Genesis' name listed on a side project. My stomach twisted. The woman I was falling for was tied to the very threat I was paid to neutralize. I closed the folder, my decision crystallizing. I would protect her even if it meant lying to my own blood. But the moral weight settled heavy on my chest. Love or legacy, which would I betray first? The tension coiled tighter as I texted Genesis to meet again soon. The storm was building and we were standing in its eye. The industry gala at the Fairmont was a battlefield disguised as elegance, crystal chandeliers, and tailored suits hiding daggers. I spotted Genesis across the ballroom, her red gown catching the light like a warning flag. Our eyes met, and held the secret pulling us despite the crowd. My father was deep in conversation with investors, his voice booming about innovation, an integrity code for destroying Harrington. I excused myself, weaving through the guests, until I reached a quiet balcony. Genesis joined me moments later, the city sparkling below us. We spoke in hushed tones about the pressure, the way our families defined us. Her hand found mine in the shadows, the touch grounding amid the chaos. But a colleague from Voss passed by, narrowing his eyes at our closeness. The next day rumors swirled at the office, whispers of favoritism, questions about my late nights. I brushed them off, but the seed of exposure was planted. Genesis faced her own storm. Her father Victor called demanding she contribute to the family defense against Voss. She refused, citing her independent work, but the argument left her shaken. We met in a hidden park near the Presidio, the eucalyptus trees shielding us. There under the canopy, she told me about her mother's quiet support, the only one who suspected her truth. I shared my own mother's subtle hints about settling down with a suitable man. The moral dilemma deepened. Every laugh, every shared glance felt like stealing from the people who raised us. Back at Voss headquarters, my father summoned me. The board wants results on the bid. Any inside info on Harrington? I lied, saying no, but the guilt burned. That night alone, I paced my apartment, weighing the betrayal. Using Genesis for intel would destroy us. Protecting her meant risking the company, my inheritance, everything. The choice tore at me. Genesis arrived unexpectedly, her face pale. My brother saw us at the gala. He suspects. We talked for hours, mapping the risks, the possible fallout. In the end, we chose honesty between us, if nothing else. The kiss that followed was softer than the first, full of promise and fear. As she left, I watched her car disappear into the night, the weight of my decisions pressing down. The social prejudice crept into. A board member made an offhand comment about modern lifestyles undermining tradition. It was aimed at no one, yet it landed on me like a slap. I began to see the invisible walls around us, the ones that said our love was wrong, unfit for our world. Still, I chose to fight for it in small ways, canceling a family brunch to meet Genesis instead. The sacrifice was small, but it marked the beginning. My inner conflict raged, loyalty to blood versus the awakening heart. Each day the price grew clearer, the potential loss of family ties, career standing, even safety in our conservative circles. Yet Genesis' presence brought clarity, a sense of self I had long suppressed. The tension escalated when my father announced a new strategy targeting Harrington projects, including one Genesis was linked to. I warned her without details, the first crack in my family armor. She appreciated it, but worry etched her features. We were playing with fire, and the flames were rising. As I drove home after our latest meeting, the fog thickened, mirroring my uncertainty. How much longer could I keep the two worlds from colliding? The answer came sooner than expected, in the form of a late-night call from my mother. Your father is suspicious, Ariana. Come home tomorrow. The confrontation loomed, and with it the test of every choice I had made. The family estate in Marin County felt colder than usual, the oak panels and heirloom rugs closing in like witnesses. My father sat at the head of the long table, his face a mask of controlled fury. Rumors have reached me, Ariana. Late-night secret meetings. Who is she? I froze, the lie dying on my tongue. Genesis' name stayed locked inside, but the truth leaked through my hesitation. My mother watched, eyes filled with disappointment. This could ruin us, she whispered. The prejudice was blatant now, the assumption that my choices threatened the family name, the business alliances. I defended myself carefully, framing it as professional networking, but the damage was done. That evening I met Genesis at our usual spot, her own news worse. Her father had confronted her directly, linking her to Voss leaks. He threatened to cut her funding, her research, her future. She chose to stand firm, refusing to spy on me. The betrayal cut both ways, our families demanding we turn on each other. The moral dilemma peaked. I had access to Harrington weaknesses through her, but using them would shatter her trust. I chose silence, sacrificing a potential win for Voss. The price was immediate. My father demoted me from the lead on the bid, assigning a loyalist instead. Colleagues whispered behind my back, the social ostracism beginning. Genesis faced similar at her circle's invitations drying up. We leaned on each other harder, the romance a lifeline amid the storm. One night in a rented cabin outside the city, we talked until dawn about running away, the fantasy tempting but unrealistic. The awakening was painful, realizing our love demanded real sacrifices, careers, family ties, reputations. A colleague from the lab leaked photos of us together to my father, the evidence undeniable. The confrontation exploded, accusations of disloyalty, of putting personal desires above blood. My father gave an ultimatum: end it or leave the company. I walked out the door, the severance of ties echoing like a gunshot. Genesis met me at the door of my apartment, her arms open. We cried together, the trauma raw but the bond stronger. The prejudice from society amplified, online comments, family, friends distancing themselves. Yet in the quiet moments we found strength. I took a lower role at a neutral firm. Genesis continued her research independently. The decisions we made reshaped us both. The cost was high, lost opportunities, strained relationships, but the growth undeniable. As weeks passed, the tension built toward a final clash, the industry summit where both families would present. We prepared for exposure knowing it could break us or forge something unbreakable. The inner conflicts resolved into clarity. Love was not the weakness they claimed, it was the courage to choose truth. But the price continued to mount every step forward, leaving pieces of our old lives behind. The summit at the Moscone Center buzzed with executives and pressed, the air electric with competition. Voss and Harrington booths stood opposite like opposing armies. I stood with my reduced team, Genesis nearby with hers. Our eyes met across the floor, the silent support fueling me. My father spotted us, his face darkening. The presentations began, mine first outlining ethical innovation, the irony not lost on me. Harrington followed, Victor touting breakthroughs that skirted the lines we had fought over. Then the Q&A turned personal, a reporter asking about family rivalries. My father seized it, launching accusations. Genesis' father countered, the room heating. In the chaos, someone leaked our relationship photos, flashing on the large screens. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The confrontation erupted in the hallway, my father demanding explanations, Genesis' father threatening lawsuits. Accusations flew, betrayal, disloyalty, shame. I stepped forward, voice steady. This is my life, not a business tactic. Genesis joined me, her hand in mine publicly for the first time. The room erupted, but we stood firm. The sacrifices came fast, my father disowned me on the spot, cutting financial ties. Genesis lost her remaining family support, her research grant pulled. Social media exploded, prejudice pouring in, comments labeling us reckless traitors. The trauma hit hard, nights of doubt, tears, but also fierce protectiveness. We retreated to a small apartment in Oakland, rebuilding from scraps. Friends who stayed offered help, the true ones emerging. The psychological toll was immense, questioning every choice, but the awakening profound. We were no longer defined by our family's legacies. In quiet talks we processed the betrayals, the prices paid, careers altered, relationships severed. Yet the love endured, stronger, forged in fire. The climax peaked at a private meeting where both fathers demanded we choose. We refused, walking away hand in hand, the final break. The emotional breakdowns gave way to resilience. As the dust settled, we saw the new path forward, independent, intertwined. The moral dilemmas resolved into acceptance that some choices defy easy right or wrong but demand courage. The industry watched, some condemning, others quietly respecting the stand. Our story became whispered legend in biotech circles. Through it all, the focus remained on the decisions, the costs, and the growth. We paid dearly but gained authenticity. The tension finally broke into cautious hope. Months later, the city lights of San Francisco twinkled below our balcony, the same view but a different life. Ariana Voss, no longer heir apparent but founder of a small ethical startup, Genesis, by my side, heading her own lab. The sacrifices had reshaped everything, lost inheritance, strained family ties, public scrutiny. Yet the awakenings outweighed them, the freedom to love openly, the strength from facing prejudice head-on. We had confronted betrayals from within, and without choosing each other every time. My father had reached out once, a terse message of reluctant respect, but the bridge remained damaged. Genesis' mother sent a quiet note of support, the only olive branch. Society still judged, whispers followed us, but we walked taller. One evening as the sun set over the bay, we sat together, her head on my shoulder. The journey from that dark lab kiss to this moment had been paved with pain and power. We had paid the price in full, careers redirected, relationships fractured, identities reborn. The moral landscape had shifted, no longer black and white, but a spectrum where love demanded its due. Friends who stayed celebrated with us, the small gatherings filled with laughter and understanding. The drama had tested us, broken us, rebuilt us stronger. As I looked at Genesis, the woman who had upended my world, I felt the deep peace of a choice well made despite the costs. The family pressures had faded into echoes, the social prejudices challenged but not erased. We lived our truth every day. The story of us was one of courage amid controversy, of choosing heart over heritage when both pulled with equal force. In the end, the lessons lingered, the value of authenticity, the pain of division, the joy of unity. We had awakened to a life defined by us, not by blood or boardrooms. Holding her hand, I smiled at the horizon, the future uncertain but ours. But as the stars emerged, one question remained burning in the quiet after the storm: when family blood and true love collide, demanding you pick a side, which one truly defines who we are, loyalty to the past or the heart that refuses to be silenced?